in the world. How many buses do we service in town we own?
How many do we service in this town that we own? 40.
40, thank you.
That's how many we operate. We do have spare buses. We operate on a daily basis 40 units.
Thank you.
If I may, am I correct, Mr. Tetro, that the town's bid only had the specifications for big buses, none of our special needs vehicles were included?
I just received a copy of that document today, and through my very brief scanning of it, it appears that it only covers large, regular education units.
That is correct.
Dr. Rabin, the town administrator bid for all the buses to be 77 passenger buses.
After it went out.
So there's no small.
There's no small.
My point is, if it's in a reverse auction, if it's a savings to the town, I don't know how much savings you get out of 20 buses, transport kids in town, because most of the major expenses are athletics going to Seekonk or special ed buses go on. So you're still responsible for the other 18 technically. It's not his.
That's right. Mr. Chairman, under this, under next steps, okay, well, when the hours are in, we have a group study them, compare our own costs with what has been bid. And if the decision is made that it is cheaper to run it in, but we have to replace some vehicles, okay, then it's time. Mr. Tetro had a bid ready to go out for maintenance and the leasing of all vehicles, all 48. But I said to him, you can't run both at the same time. It makes no sense. It is confusing to vendors. Let's do the full soup and nuts bid first, so we know what that number is and we can compare it against our own numbers and do our analysis. Then we will come back to this group with those numbers and have that discussion. When that is done, that is the time to then say, okay, do we continue the maintenance in-house, or do we ask for a bid that takes care of the maintenance and the leasing of all vehicles? Or do we look for half? But that was the wrong timing to send out that bid, because it confused the issue with Ford. And there are vendors that refused because they showed up at our office instead of the town administrator's office. That's how I found out about their pre-bid meeting.
You're telling me something I didn't even know. You found out of the pre-meeting because the vendor off?
Yes.
You weren't informed of the pre-bid meeting?
I did get invitation, I'd say 3 days beforehand. I think I got an invitation on a Friday, and it was running on a Monday.
Mr. Chair, may I?
Go ahead.
An email was received by us from Susan Green, Friday, November 19th at 3:20 p.m., which means the school addresses are on there. I'm assuming, I can't speak for my colleagues on the board, but maybe some members don't check them. I haven't checked school. I don't do it every day.
I don't do it every day.
Maybe that's a fault, but
I do it.
for this to go out
a week.
For this to go out Friday at 3:21 p.m., saying that you are invited to a pre-bid conference, November 23rd at 10 a.m., and I read this Monday, and I already have other appointments and things, I'm not going to be there. So I don't think that they found out at 3:19 on a Friday that they were having this pre-bid. It doesn't give us too much time to respond, and yet you read in the paper or comments from the public, nobody from the school was there, other than I believe Ms. Miranda attended, but nobody was there because I got this after the fact. I found out Monday night that there was going to be a meeting Tuesday, and I won't tell you what my words were, but I couldn't make it. So I think that's part of the communication. But I think we need to move forward. We can sit here and go back and forth at each other, and it's not going to accomplish anything. I think we need to get the reverse auction, whatever the results are. I would hope selectmen in the audience takes this information back to the board, that we do want to be involved in a collaboration, that when our bid comes back and the reverse auction comes back, that a committee looks at it and starts to look at next steps. Where do we go from here? Because if we're going back and forth, we're not going to get anywhere.
This is a good segue into what, I'm going to make a recommendation. I hope I get the support of the committee. As we go forward, and it's clear to me now, as someone that's been in this business for almost 50 years, that we've got to take a narrow focus of this thing now. We've got to concentrate on one thing and one thing only as these bids come back. And that is doing a comparative study. That can't be done by a cast of thousands. That is going to be done by a small, focused group that will review these bids, perform a comparative study as it relates to our own system. So therefore, I'm recommending that a small group be formed to advise the superintendent, administration, and the school committee in comparing this comparative study. So I'm recommending that the superintendent establish a superintendent study group to work on this task. And I would really appreciate it if Mr. Fonce and Mr. Sweat would continue their work for the school committee and be a member of this study group. And I think that by doing, having a narrow focus and establishing the superintendent study group, that we can roll up our sleeves, really look at it from a service delivery perspective and also a financial perspective, and facilitate the process and come up with realistic recommendations relative to transportation and the budget. And I would strongly recommend that the committee support that recommendation. Any questions, discussion?
This advisory committee or whatever, I would imagine that there has to be involvement with the town administrator. If we're working together with the reverse auction, I'm kind of...
That would be, I'm not going to get into the specificity of this study committee or this study group. It's just a superintendent study group. It's to roll up your sleeves and work out the comparative study. And whether or not he wants to, if he feels that we're going to have the town administrator there, that's fine. But, you know, he's busy. He's not always available. And so I just, whatever the superintendent wants. But I think that you can't have a cast of thousands in performing this function. And I think that we've got to keep it focused and we've got to keep it simple. And then at the point that they're ready to make their recommendations, we can involve the community in any way we see fit. That's my recommendation.
Yeah, I understand we don't want to get into micromanaging the whole process. Just like in the bids that I do at work, when it gets to a certain point, it's down to the senior contract agent and the director of the area that you're supporting that will go through the process. I understand that, but I still think, I know your comments, Mr. Chair, were that the town administrator is busy. Well, I think so. Everybody else here is. So I can't accept that as a reason. The town administrator has a board of selectmen that he can reach out to for a member or something. But until we work together, we're not going to accomplish anything. I agree that a committee with 9 members, or 10 or 11 or 7 is just too many people looking at the process. The transportation subcommittee had 3 goals, if you will. And the first one was working on the safety of the buses, the inspections, and I think that was done. The second was the process of putting the interviews together for the hiring of the transportation manager, and part of the interview process, and that was done. And then the third thing was to get the RFP out, and somewhere along the walk to grandmother's house, the reverse auction went off in this direction, and now we've got to find a way to pull all that back together. And that would be my only concern, Mr. Chair, with the group, is I understand let's try to get a focus group, but somehow the other player, another player.
It's just the superintendent's advisory committee, it's just to work in establishing this, it's what it is, it's a comparative study. And I think you need to look at it from a financial perspective and also a service delivery perspective. And I don't think you need to cast a thousands for that. I think that once this study is done, then they'll be in a position to make recommendations not only to the school committee, board of selectmen, town administrator, President Obama, it doesn't matter. But I think that this function of a comparative study is going to be done first.
I do agree with Kenny that I think that it creates a disservice to the vendors that are applying. I think that if we don't continue to try to pull these bids together, it's going to continue to confuse as well as delay any output that we're hoping to achieve with this process. What we all want to get to is how are we going to create a safe system to transport our children, but also in the most efficient way for the town. That is the collective goal, I think, everyone on this committee, the superintendent, the town administrator, the board of selectmen, that is our goal. If we continue to work in our own silos, what it's doing is that it's causing confusion in the process. And I just think it's important for us to do whatever possible, and I know that you have, Dr. Rabinovich. I'm hoping that we continue to do that, to try to pull these together so it doesn't continue to cause confusion as well as delay in what we're looking for. That's what I'm going to say about this one.
Mr. Chairman, I don't really believe that there's a necessity for a vote. I've heard.
No, it's just a recommendation.
Right, you would like
There'd be a study group that you would put together, and I would just hope that that Jeff and Kenny would be part of that.
And we will definitely get together and look at the results. We will definitely get together and do the comparative study, and then we will come back to this committee. And I will definitely continue my efforts to communicate with the town administrator and hope that he will be available to me to discuss this.
That's all we can ask for. But I do think that in the actual process of putting together the comparative study, it's got to be a small group of people that are going to take all the aspects of the bid and compare it to what we're actually doing, operationally and budget financially.
Okay.
That's my point.
Okay.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, has there been any conversation with the town administrator as to next steps when, I don't even know the date, I had his stuff around here, when the reverse auction comes back, when that information is going to sit in the town administrator's office, or is the intent to share that with us? Because you can't do a comparison with that piece missing.
It is on my agenda for this coming Monday's meeting at 5 p.m. Dr. Sylvia and I have been invited to meet with the town administrator and the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, and that will be on my agenda.
Okay.
And I'll bring you back the answer.
Good.